What if the most iconic symbol of American resolve in World War II still harbors secrets that could reshape our understanding of that infamous day? What if, beneath the oil-slicked waters of Pearl Harbor, lies evidence that challenges everything historians thought they knew about December 7, 1941? The USS Arizona, entombed in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor, stands as both monument and mystery. For more than 8 decades, this sunken battleship has served as a memorial to the 1,177 sailors and Marines who perished when Japanese bombs tore through her decks. But recent discoveries have sent shockwaves through the historical community, revealing that this underwater grave continues to yield secrets that were never meant to surface. The rusting hulk, still leaking oil at a rate of 2 to 9 quarts per day, what survivors poetically call the Tears of the Arizona, has become the focal point of an archaeological and historical revelation that threatens to rewrite the narrative of America's entry into World War II. The relevance of Pearl Harbor extends far beyond historical curiosity. It represents the moment when isolationist America was thrust onto the world stage, when a nation's innocence was shattered in a matter of hours, and when ordinary men became legends through sacrifice. Yet, as modern technology allows researchers to probe deeper into the wreckage, they are discovering that the story we have told ourselves for generations may be incomplete. What lies within the Arizona's twisted metal corridors? What evidence has been preserved by the very waters that became a tomb? And perhaps most provocatively, what truths have been deliberately obscured by time, trauma, and official narrative? The morning of December 7, 1941, began like any other Sunday in paradise. Pearl Harbor, nestled on the southern coast of Oahu, Hawaii, was home to the United States Pacific Fleet, a collection of battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and aircraft that represented American naval might in the Pacific. The USS Arizona, commissioned in 1916, was a Pennsylvania-class super dreadnought battleship, displacing over 32,000 tons and measuring 608 feet in length. She was a floating fortress, armed with 12 14-inch guns and protected by armor plating up to 13 inches thick. On that fateful morning, she was moored at Battleship Row alongside 7 other battleships, her crew of 1,500 men preparing for a routine day in port. At 7:48 a.m., the tranquility shattered. The first wave of Japanese aircraft, 183 planes launched from 6 aircraft carriers positioned 230 miles north of Oahu, descended upon Pearl Harbor with devastating precision. For the Arizona, the end came swiftly and catastrophically. At approximately 8:10 a.m., a modified 16-inch naval shell, converted into an armor-piercing bomb and dropped from a Nakajima B-5N bomber piloted by Flight Petty Officer Noboru Kanai, struck the battleship near the second turret. The bomb penetrated the forward deck and detonated in or near the forward ammunition magazine, triggering a chain reaction of explosions that tore the mighty vessel apart. The explosion was cataclysmic. Witnesses reported a fireball rising hundreds of feet into the air, so intense that it incinerated men on nearby ships. The forward section of the Arizona lifted from the water before collapsing, and the ship settled to the harbor bottom in less than 9 minutes. Of the 1,512 men aboard, 1,177 perished, nearly half of all American casualties that day. Among the dead was Rear Admiral Isaac C. Kidd, who became the first American flag officer killed in World War II, and Captain Franklin Van Valkenburg, the ship's commanding officer. Both men were posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor for remaining at their posts as their ship disintegrated around them. The significance of this moment cannot be overstated. The attack on Pearl Harbor killed 2,403 Americans, wounded 1,178, and destroyed or damaged 18 ships and 347 aircraft. President Franklin D. Roosevelt would declare December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, and the following day the United States declared war on Japan, formally entering World War II. The Arizona became an immediate symbol of that infamy, a steel coffin lying in plain sight, a constant reminder of treachery and sacrifice. But here lies the intriguing contradiction that has captivated historians in recent years. The Arizona was not simply abandoned to rust away in silence. The Navy made a deliberate choice not to attempt recovery of the bodies or salvage of the ship. While other damaged vessels were raised, repaired, and returned to service, including the battleship USS Nevada, which had attempted to escape the harbor during the attack, the Arizona was deemed both too damaged to salvage and too sacred to disturb. In 1962, a memorial was built above the wreck, designed by architect Alfred Price to span the sunken hull without touching it. The memorial receives over 2 million visitors annually, making it one of the most visited sites in the National Park Service. Yet this decision to leave the Arizona undisturbed has preserved something extraordinary. Unlike salvaged vessels, whose interiors were stripped, cleaned, and repurposed, the Arizona remains a time capsule. Everything within her hull, personal effects, ammunition, fuel, equipment, and human remains, has been sealed beneath the Pacific for more than 80 years. The ship exists in a state of arrested decay, her interior spaces filled with sediment, her metal slowly corroding, her structure gradually collapsing inward. To historians and archaeologists, this makes the Arizona one of the most significant underwater archaeological sites in the world. The moment that changed everything for modern researchers came not with a single dramatic discovery, but with the gradual realization that technology had advanced to a point where the Arizona could finally reveal her secrets without disturbing her sanctity. In the early 2000s, the National Park Service, in partnership with the Navy and various research institutions, began comprehensive surveys of the wreck using advanced sonar, remotely operated vehicles, and three-dimensional mapping technologies. What they found astonished even seasoned Pearl Harbor historians. To understand the true significance of what lies hidden within the Arizona, one must first comprehend the forces that shaped both the ship and the men who served aboard her. The Arizona's story begins not in the chaos of war, but in the calm calculations of naval architects and the ambitions of a growing world power. Constructed at the Brooklyn Navy Yard between 1914 and 1916, the USS Arizona represented the pinnacle of American naval engineering in the dreadnought era. She was built during a period of intense naval competition when the world's great powers measured their strength in battleship tonnage. The United States, emerging as a global force, was determined to build a navy second to none. The Arizona and her sister ship, the Pennsylvania, embodied this ambition. They were faster, more heavily armed, and better protected than their predecessors, designed to control sea lanes and project power across vast oceanic distances. The ship cost approximately $13 million to build, an enormous sum in 1916, equivalent to hundreds of millions in modern currency. Her construction required thousands of tons of steel, miles of electrical wiring, and the labor of thousands of skilled workers. Every aspect of her design reflected the state of naval warfare in the early 20th century. Her main battery of 12 14-inch guns, arranged in 4 triple turrets, could hurl shells weighing over 1,000 pounds to distances exceeding 20 miles. Her secondary armament included 22 5-inch guns for defense against smaller vessels and aircraft. Below her armored deck, machinery spaces housed turbines generating 34,000 horsepower, capable of driving her through the water at 21 knots. The men who served aboard the Arizona came from every corner of America. They were farm boys from Iowa and factory workers from Pennsylvania, college students from California, and immigrants chasing the American dream. Many were barely out of their teens. They enlisted for adventure, for steady pay during the Depression, or because military service was a family tradition. What united them was pride in serving aboard one of the Navy's most prestigious vessels. Assignment to a battleship carried prestige. These were the capital ships, the floating embodiments of American power. Life aboard the Arizona reflected the rigid hierarchy and routines of naval service. Officers occupied comfortable quarters with private spaces, while enlisted men slept in cramped berthing areas, their hammocks strung so close together that shoulders touched. Days were structured around watches, drills, maintenance, and ceremonies. The ship was a self-contained city with its own post office, barbershop, library, and even a soda fountain. Men formed tight bonds, their survival depending on teamwork and mutual trust. Divisions became like families, with senior petty officers serving as stern but protective father figures to younger sailors. The daily routine aboard the Arizona followed patterns established by decades of naval tradition. Reveille sounded at dawn, followed by cleaning stations where every inch of the ship was scrubbed, polished, or painted. Breakfast was served in shifts, with men lining up at the galley with metal trays. Training occupied much of the day. Gunnery drills, damage control exercises, seamanship practice. The ship's band provided music for ceremonies and entertainment. In the evenings, men wrote letters home, played cards or dice games, read magazines, or gathered to listen to radio broadcasts. Liberty in port was highly valued, offering escape from the ship's confines and the Navy's strict discipline. But there were contradictions inherent in this life. The Arizona was simultaneously a weapon of war and a peacetime showpiece. Between 1916 and 1941, she participated in training exercises, goodwill cruises, and ceremonial events, but never fired her guns in anger. Her crew prepared endlessly for combat that never came. This created a strange psychological tension, the constant drilling for war while living in extended peace. Some sailors grew complacent, viewing their service as a well-paid adventure rather than preparation for mortal combat. Others, particularly the career officers and senior enlisted men, understood that war with Japan was increasingly probable and trained their men accordingly. The geopolitical currents pulling America toward war with Japan were complex and years in the making. Japan's invasion of Manchuria in 1931, followed by full-scale war with China in 1937, put Japanese imperialism on a collision course with American interests in Asia. The United States, with its own colonies in the Philippines and Guam, and its traditional support for the open-door policy in China, found Japan's expansionism intolerable. Economic sanctions and embargoes followed, culminating in July 1941, when President Roosevelt froze Japanese assets and imposed a total oil embargo. For Japan, heavily dependent on imported oil, this was an existential threat. War became not a matter of if, but when. Yet American military leadership was divided on where and when Japan would strike. Most assumed the Philippines would be the initial target, or perhaps British Malaya or the Dutch East Indies. Few considered Hawaii a likely objective, despite its obvious strategic importance as the home of the Pacific Fleet. Pearl Harbor seemed too distant, too well defended, too risky for a successful surprise attack. This failure of imagination would prove catastrophic. The planning for the Pearl Harbor attack began in January 1941, when Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet, first proposed the operation. Yamamoto understood that Japan could not win a prolonged war with the United States. Japan's only hope lay in a devastating surprise attack that would cripple American naval power in the Pacific, buying time for Japan to consolidate its territorial conquests and establish a defensive perimeter too costly for America to breach. The plan was audacious and risky. It required sailing a carrier task force across thousands of miles of ocean undetected, coordinating a complex aerial assault involving hundreds of aircraft, and achieving complete surprise against an enemy presumed to be on alert. Throughout 1941, Japanese planners refined their strategy. Pilots trained intensively, practicing torpedo runs in shallow water, similar to Pearl Harbor's depth. Intelligence officers compiled detailed information about American ship movements, harbor defenses, and daily routines. Diplomats in Washington maintained negotiations to mask military preparations. By November, the plan was ready. The carrier task force sailed from Japan on November 26th, taking a northern route across the Pacific, where commercial shipping was minimal and detection unlikely. The year 1941 brought subtle changes to the Arizona and her crew. Training intensified. Liberty was occasionally restricted. Security measures were tightened, yet the overall atmosphere remained one of peacetime routine. When the Arizona moored at Pearl Harbor in late November 1941, returning from maneuvers, most of her crew looked forward to a restful December. Many had made plans for shore leave, Christmas shopping, or visits to Honolulu's beaches and bars. The ship was scheduled for maintenance, with some crew members transferred ashore temporarily. This seemingly mundane detail, the maintenance schedule, would later become crucial to understanding what the wreck still hides. The night of December 6, 1941, was typical for Pearl Harbor. Many officers attended parties ashore. Enlisted men with liberty enjoyed the delights of Honolulu. Others wrote letters home, played cards, or simply slept in their bunks. The ship's log recorded nothing unusual. The watch stood their posts. The harbor was peaceful under tropical stars. Nobody aboard the Arizona knew that Japanese carriers were at that moment launching their aircraft in darkness, preparing for the attack that would come with dawn. Among the crew that night were men whose stories would become part of Arizona's legend. Seaman First Class Russell Warrener, just 19 years old, had written to his mother the previous day, describing his happiness at serving aboard such a fine ship. Marine Private Leo Amundsen was planning to propose to his girlfriend when he returned to the mainland. Chief Petty Officer John Anderson, a career sailor with 20 years of service, was helping younger men with their studies for advancement exams. Ensign Douglas Hine had recently graduated from the Naval Academy, full of idealism about naval service. These men and over 1,000 others would not live to see December 8th. The story of what lies hidden within the Arizona encompasses themes that transcend naval history and touch upon the very nature of memory, trauma, and historical truth. At its core, this is a narrative about the tension between commemoration and investigation, between leaving the dead undisturbed and seeking answers that might help the living understand the past more completely. The first and most profound theme is that of the Arizona as a war grave. From the moment the ship sank, she became more than a destroyed vessel. She became a tomb, a sacred space where over 1,000 men died instantaneously or were trapped as the ship settled to the bottom. The decision not to attempt recovery of remains was both practical and philosophical. Practical because the violence of the explosion and subsequent fire made recovery dangerous and, in many cases, impossible. Philosophical because the Navy and the nation needed a tangible symbol of sacrifice, a place where the dead could be honored without being reduced to statistics or scattered across distant cemeteries. This sanctification of the Arizona created a unique archaeological situation. Unlike battle sites on land, which can be excavated and studied, or salvaged ships, which reveal their secrets during recovery, the Arizona remained sealed, her contents preserved but inaccessible. For decades, this seemed appropriate. The memorial, built in 1962, provided a place for remembrance without disturbing the graves below. Survivors could return, knowing their shipmates rested undisturbed. Families could mourn, knowing their loved ones lay in a place of honor. But this reverence also created historical blind spots. What evidence did the Arizona preserve that could answer lingering questions about the attack? How accurate were survivor accounts, given the chaos and trauma of that morning? What can forensic examination of the wreck reveal about Japanese tactics, American preparedness, and the actual sequence of events that led to the ship's destruction? These questions lead to the second major theme, the evolution of memory and the unreliability of historical narrative. For years, the story of Pearl Harbor was told primarily through survivor accounts, military records, and official reports. These sources, while invaluable, are not infallible. Survivors suffer from the natural limitations of human memory, particularly traumatic memory. Witnesses to the same event often provide contradictory accounts. Official reports can be incomplete, sanitized, or shaped by institutional interests. The case of the Arizona illustrates this perfectly. For decades, historians believed they understood exactly how the ship was destroyed. The official account held that a bomb penetrated the forward deck and detonated in the forward magazine, causing a catastrophic explosion. But recent investigations have revealed complexities that challenge this neat narrative. Advanced sonar mapping and analysis of the wreck's structure suggest that the explosion may have been even more powerful than previously believed, possibly indicating that multiple magazines detonated in sequence. The pattern of damage suggests that the bomb may have struck at a slightly different angle than traditionally depicted, with implications for understanding both the bomb's trajectory and the Arizona's defensive posture at the moment of impact. Moreover, examination of the wreck has revealed evidence of damage that cannot be explained by the magazine explosion alone. Some structural failures appear consistent with torpedo strikes, raising the possibility that the Arizona was hit by both aerial bombs and torpedoes launched from Japanese aircraft. This contradicts the long-held assumption that the ship was sunk solely by the single catastrophic bomb hit. If torpedoes did strike the Arizona, it means that her end was more complex than previously understood, and that Japanese tactics that morning were more coordinated than official accounts suggest. Analysis of survivor testimony has also revealed inconsistencies that researchers are only now beginning to untangle. Some survivors reported seeing torpedo wakes approaching the ship before the major explosion. Others described multiple impacts before the catastrophic blast. Still others remembered the sequence of events differently, placing explosions at different times or in different locations. For decades, these contradictions were dismissed as the natural confusion of traumatic memory. But as researchers correlate survivor accounts with physical evidence from the wreck, patterns emerge suggesting that some memories may be more accurate than previously credited, while official accounts may have oversimplified a chaotic situation. The third theme centers on the physical reality of what remains hidden within the wreck. The Arizona still contains vast quantities of artifacts, equipment, and remains that provide a snapshot of life aboard a 1940s battleship. Personal effects, letters, photographs, watches, wedding rings, lie scattered throughout the ship. Weapons and ammunition remain in magazines and ready lockers. Medical supplies sit unused in the sickbay. Food stocks fill storage compartments. The ship's safe, located in the administrative spaces, likely still contains cash, personnel records, and classified documents. Each of these items represents not just historical data, but human stories, the individual lives that were extinguished in an instant. The preservation conditions within the wreck vary dramatically depending on location. Compartments that flooded immediately after the explosion contain items suspended in sediment, protected from oxygen and biological activity that would normally cause rapid decomposition. These anaerobic conditions have preserved organic materials, leather, cloth, paper, even human tissue, that would otherwise have disappeared decades ago. In contrast, areas exposed to water circulation experience more rapid corrosion and degradation. This creates a complex preservation landscape where some artifacts remain remarkably intact, while others have deteriorated beyond recognition. The Arizona also contains substantial quantities of fuel oil and ammunition, which present ongoing environmental and safety concerns. An estimated 500,000 gallons of fuel oil remain in the ship's bunkers, slowly leaking into the harbor. While the current leak rate is relatively slow, there is concern that as the ship's structure continues to deteriorate, a catastrophic release could occur, causing significant environmental damage to the harbor and surrounding marine ecosystems. The fuel oil itself has changed character over 8 decades, becoming thicker and more viscous, but it remains toxic to marine life and continues to pose pollution risks. Similarly, unexploded ordnance within the ship presents potential hazards, though the risk of spontaneous detonation after more than 80 years is considered low. The Arizona carried shells for her main and secondary batteries, depth charges, small arms ammunition, and potentially torpedoes for her observation aircraft. Some of this ordnance was detonated during the initial explosion, but much remains. The shells contain high explosives that, while chemically stable, could potentially be triggered by structural collapse or unauthorized interference with the wreck. This ordnance makes any physical entry into the wreck extremely dangerous and has been a major factor in restricting access to the interior spaces. But perhaps the most haunting reality is the presence of human remains. While some remains were recovered in the immediate aftermath of the sinking, the vast majority were never retrieved. Some bodies were incinerated by the initial explosion and fire. Others were trapped in sealed compartments as the ship sank. Still others were entombed as debris collapsed around them. Over the decades, these remains have largely disarticulated and become part of the sediment that fills the ship's interior spaces. This creates an ethical and emotional complexity that haunts every discussion of further investigation or preservation efforts. DNA technology has advanced to the point where, theoretically, remains could be identified if they were recovered. Families of the missing have provided DNA samples to the Defense POW MIA accounting agency, hoping for closure. But the practical challenges of recovery are immense. The remains are mixed with sediment throughout the wreck. Many are incomplete or degraded beyond the point where DNA analysis would be possible, and the act of recovery would require extensive disturbance of the wreck, potentially compromising its structural integrity and certainly violating its character as a memorial. The fourth theme explores the intersection of technology and memory. For decades, the limitations of diving and underwater imaging technology meant that the Arizona could only be viewed from outside, her secrets locked within inaccessible spaces. But advances in remote sensing, autonomous underwater vehicles, and non-invasive imaging have revolutionized what researchers can learn without physically entering or disturbing the wreck. Three-dimensional sonar mapping has created detailed models of the ship's current state, revealing how the structure has changed over time. These models show that the ship is slowly collapsing inward, with upper decks settling onto lower ones, bulkheads failing, and compartments becoming increasingly crushed and compressed. This deterioration is accelerating, meaning that future generations may not have the opportunity to study the Arizona as she exists today. The wreck is disappearing, slowly consumed by corrosion and gravity. The mapping revealed unexpected features. Areas of the hull thought to be intact showed significant damage invisible from the exterior. Debris fields around the wreck contained artifacts blown clear during the explosion. The distribution of wreckage provided clues about the explosion's dynamics and the ship's final moments. Most surprisingly, the surveys revealed that portions of the ship's structure had shifted position over the decades, settling deeper into the harbor bottom or collapsing in ways not previously documented. Remotely operated vehicles equipped with high-definition cameras have explored some of the ship's exterior spaces, documenting marine growth, structural condition, and visible artifacts. These explorations have captured haunting images: a ship's bell encrusted with coral, the forward gun turrets collapsed at unnatural angles, the mainmast lying across the deck where it fell during the explosion. Personal items visible on the deck, a shoe, fragments of clothing, unidentifiable metal objects, serve as poignant reminders of the human cost. Advanced imaging techniques, including multi-beam sonar and photogrammetry, have allowed researchers to create virtual models of the wreck so detailed that individual rivets and hull plates can be distinguished. These models serve multiple purposes: documentation for future study, baseline data for monitoring deterioration, and educational tools that allow people worldwide to explore the site virtually. Students can navigate through three-dimensional representations of the wreck, examining damage patterns and learning about naval architecture without ever visiting Pearl Harbor. Chemical analysis of the leaking oil has provided insights into fuel composition and weathering processes. Samples collected over decades show how the oil's properties have changed, information relevant to understanding long-term petroleum degradation in marine environments. This seemingly mundane data has implications for modern environmental concerns, informing response strategies for shipwrecks and oil spills worldwide. Acoustic monitoring equipment has been deployed around the wreck to detect sounds of structural failure. The Arizona occasionally groans and creaks as metal buckles and compartments collapse. These sounds are recorded and analyzed, helping researchers predict where future failures are likely and how quickly the deterioration is progressing. The acoustic data also captures sounds of marine life that has colonized the wreck, adding an ecological dimension to the monitoring efforts. The discoveries within and around the Arizona have forced historians, archaeologists, and preservation experts to grapple with fundamental questions. How do we honor the dead while pursuing historical truth? How do we preserve a site that is slowly destroying itself? And what responsibilities do we have to future generations who will inherit this legacy? One solution has been the development of comprehensive documentation and digital preservation initiatives. Recognizing that the physical Arizona will eventually succumb to corrosion and collapse, researchers have prioritized creating detailed records of the wreck as it exists now. The National Park Service, in partnership with various academic institutions and the Navy, has conducted extensive surveys that have produced high-resolution maps and three-dimensional models of the entire site. These digital twins capture not just the overall structure, but minute details: individual hull plates, artillery shells, even small personal items visible on the deck. This documentation serves multiple purposes. It provides baseline data for monitoring the wreck's deterioration over time, allowing researchers to model decay rates and predict structural failures. It creates a permanent record that will persist even after the physical ship is gone. And it enables virtual exploration of the site for people who will never have the opportunity to visit in person. Students can explore the wreck in virtual reality, historians can analyze structural details from their offices, and survivors or family members can revisit the site without the physical and emotional challenges of actual travel. The documentation project has also revealed practical insights about underwater archaeological preservation. Researchers discovered that certain imaging techniques work better in Pearl Harbor's turbid water than others. They developed protocols for operating equipment near the wreck without disturbing sediment or damaging fragile structures. They created workflows for processing massive amounts of data efficiently. These methodologies are now being applied to other underwater heritage sites around the world, making the Arizona project a model for similar efforts. But documentation alone cannot address all the questions raised by recent discoveries. Some insights require analysis of materials and artifacts from the wreck itself, which raises the contentious issue of artifact recovery. For decades, the policy has been strict non-disturbance. Nothing should be removed from the site. However, as researchers have identified specific items that could provide crucial historical information, This absolute prohibition has been questioned. The debate centers on whether careful, limited recovery of certain artifacts might be justified if it advances historical understanding without compromising the site's memorial function. For example, documents or logbooks that might be preserved in sealed compartments could provide unprecedented insights into the ship's operations and the crew's activities in the days before the attack. Analysis of ammunition could reveal details about American ordnance quality and storage practices. Examination of personal effects could illuminate the lives of individual crew members in ways that official records cannot. Metallurgical analysis of the ship's armor and structure could answer questions about why the bomb penetrated so effectively and how the explosion propagated through the ship. This information has implications beyond historical curiosity. It informs modern naval architecture and ship defense design. Understanding how the Arizona failed could help engineers design better protected vessels or develop more effective damage control procedures. Those who advocate for limited artifact recovery argue that the ship itself is the memorial, and that carefully retrieving items that would otherwise be lost to decay serves the memory of the fallen by ensuring their stories are told more completely. They point to precedents from other war grave sites where recovery has been conducted with appropriate reverence and has significantly enhanced historical knowledge. They also note that some artifacts are already exposed on the deck or in accessible areas, making their eventual loss inevitable without intervention. The recovery of the ship's bell in the 1980s established a precedent. The bell was carefully removed, conserved, and placed on display at the memorial's visitor center, where it serves an educational purpose while remaining respectfully presented. Some argue that other artifacts could be treated similarly, recovered with appropriate ceremony, conserved using best practices, and displayed in educational contexts that honor the men who died. Opponents argue that any artifact recovery, however carefully conducted, violates the sanctity of the grave and sets a dangerous precedent. They contend that the dead should not be disturbed for the curiosity of the living, and that historical knowledge, while valuable, is not worth compromising the memorial's spiritual and emotional significance. They express concern that even limited recovery could lead to pressure for more extensive excavation, ultimately transforming a sacred site into an archaeological dig. Religious and cultural perspectives complicate these debates. Different faith traditions have varying views on treatment of the dead and the sanctity of burial sites. Some families of Arizona casualties support careful recovery efforts if they might lead to identification of remains or greater understanding of their loved ones' final moments. Others adamantly oppose any disturbance, viewing the ship as a sacred tomb that must remain inviolate. Native Hawaiian cultural advisors have provided input on appropriate practices, drawing on traditional views about underwater sites and honoring the dead. This debate has led to the development of nuanced policies that attempt to balance preservation, research, and respect. The current approach allows for detailed external documentation and non-invasive investigation, but prohibits entry into the hull or recovery of artifacts, except in exceptional circumstances. An example of such an exception occurred when divers recovered a railing from the wreck that had broken off due to corrosion and posed both a safety hazard and a risk of loss. The recovered railing was conserved and placed on display in the Pearl Harbor Visitor Center, where it serves an educational purpose while remaining respectfully presented. Another solution has emerged from the recognition that the Arizona is not just a historical site, but an active marine environment. The wreck has become an artificial reef, supporting diverse marine life. Fish shelter within its structure, corals grow on its surfaces, and the constant oil seepage creates a unique microhabitat. Marine biologists have documented this ecosystem, finding species that specifically associate with the wreck. This ecological dimension adds another layer of complexity to preservation efforts. Any intervention must consider not just historical and memorial concerns, but environmental impacts as well. The marine community around the Arizona includes tropical fish species, invertebrates, and occasional visits from larger animals like sea turtles and sharks. Some species appear to be attracted to the oil seepage, feeding on microorganisms that metabolize petroleum compounds. This has led to interesting ecological studies about biological oil degradation and how marine ecosystems adapt to pollution sources. While the oil leak is certainly not beneficial overall, the localized community around the leak points shows nature's resilience and adaptability. The insights gained from studying the Arizona extend beyond the specific circumstances of her loss. The wreck has become a laboratory for understanding how ships deteriorate in tropical marine environments, informing preservation strategies for other underwater heritage sites worldwide. Corrosion patterns observed on the Arizona have helped materials scientists develop better predictive models for structural failure in submerged vessels. Different metals corrode at different rates, creating complex patterns of decay. The Arizona's mixture of steel, brass, bronze, and other alloys provides a natural experiment in marine corrosion that researchers have studied extensively. The site has also provided crucial data for understanding oil weathering processes, with implications for responding to modern oil spills and leaks. The slow, steady release of oil from the Arizona over 8 decades offers insights into long-term petroleum degradation that would be difficult or impossible to study through short-term experiments. Researchers have documented how the oil changes chemically over time, how it interacts with marine sediments and organisms, and how environmental factors like temperature and water chemistry affect its persistence. Perhaps most importantly, the Arizona has offered profound insights into the nature of commemoration and collective memory. The memorial above the wreck is not just a tourist attraction or historical marker. It is a living connection between past and present, a place where the horrors of war remain tangibly present. Visitors report powerful emotional experiences, particularly when viewing oil droplets rising from the wreck below. These tears create a visceral connection to the men entombed beneath, a reminder that the events of December 7, 1941 are not ancient history, but living memory for some survivors and fresh grief for their descendants. The solution, then, is not to choose between preservation and investigation, between commemoration and research, but to pursue all these goals simultaneously with appropriate reverence and care. The Arizona must remain primarily a memorial, but she can also be a site of ongoing scholarship. She must be protected from disturbance, but also documented before she disappears. She must honor the dead, but also educate the living. This balanced approach requires constant dialogue among stakeholders: historians, archaeologists, Navy officials, Park Service personnel, survivors, family members, and the broader public. Educational programs developed around the Arizona demonstrate this balanced approach. School groups visit the memorial and learn not just about the attack, but about naval service, World War II, and the importance of remembering history. Ranger-led programs discuss the ongoing research and preservation challenges. Virtual reality experiences allow people who cannot visit Pearl Harbor to explore the memorial and learn about the men who served aboard the Arizona. These programs serve the living while honoring the dead, making the memorial a site of active learning rather than passive observation. The Arizona has also inspired comparative studies of other war graves and memorials. How does the American approach to Pearl Harbor compare to British treatment of HMS Royal Oak, sunk by a German U-boat in Scapa Flow? What can be learned from the preservation of Civil War shipwrecks or ancient Mediterranean vessels? These comparative analyses reveal different cultural approaches to memory, death, and historical preservation, enriching our understanding of how societies grapple with traumatic histories. The ongoing revelations about the Arizona raise profound questions about how societies remember and interpret traumatic historical events. The story we tell about Pearl Harbor has always served purposes beyond simple historical documentation. It has shaped national identity, justified military policy, and provided moral lessons for successive generations. But what happens when new evidence challenges that carefully constructed narrative? The first critical question concerns the morality of disturbing war graves in pursuit of historical knowledge. Is there a point at which the quest for truth becomes desecration? Different cultures and religions have varying perspectives on the treatment of human remains and grave sites. In Western tradition, there is generally a strong prohibition against disturbing the dead without compelling reason. Yet archaeology routinely involves excavating burials, and we accept this when the educational or scientific value is deemed sufficient. The Arizona occupies an uncomfortable middle ground, recent enough that some survivors are still alive, yet distant enough that it represents historical study rather than current events. This dilemma is particularly acute because the men of the Arizona did not choose to become monuments. They were sailors who expected to live, to return home to pursue ordinary futures. Their deaths transformed them into symbols and the decision to leave them entombed rather than recovered was made by others, for reasons both practical and political. Some family members have expressed frustration that their loved ones' remains were never retrieved, feeling that the memorial function has taken precedence over individual dignity. Others find comfort in knowing their relatives rest aboard the ship they served, surrounded by shipmates. The question of consent haunts these discussions. Can we claim to honor the dead while making decisions about their treatment that they never consented to? Would the men of the Arizona have wanted to remain aboard their ship, or would they have preferred recovery and burial in family plots? We cannot know, which means any decision involves imposing our values and preferences on those who cannot speak for themselves. This ethical complexity has no easy resolution. Religious perspectives add further dimensions. Christian traditions generally favor burial and resurrection of the body, which might suggest that remains should be recovered. Jewish tradition emphasizes respect for the dead and prompt burial, which could support recovery efforts. Some native Hawaiian spiritual traditions view the ocean as an appropriate resting place for warriors, which might support leaving the Arizona undisturbed. Buddhist and Hindu perspectives on impermanence and the separation of soul from body offer yet other frameworks for thinking about these questions. The Arizona's crew came from diverse religious backgrounds, meaning no single theological perspective can claim primacy. The second critical question examines how the Arizona narrative has been shaped by political and institutional interests over the decades. The official story of Pearl Harbor has always emphasized American innocence and Japanese treachery. The surprise attack, the day of infamy, the sleeping giant awakened. This narrative served crucial purposes during the war, unifying a nation and justifying total commitment to victory. But it also simplified complex geopolitical realities and obscured American intelligence failures, diplomatic missteps, and institutional incompetence that made the attack possible. New evidence from the Arizona and other sources complicates this simple story. It reveals that American forces had more warning of Japanese intentions than the official narrative admitted. Signals intelligence had detected Japanese diplomatic and military preparations. American cryptographers had broken Japanese codes and were reading diplomatic cables. Radar operators on Oahu detected the incoming Japanese aircraft, but were told not to worry about it. These failures were not unknown at the time, but they were downplayed in favor of the narrative of unprovoked surprise attack. The institutional desire to maintain a clear, morally uncomplicated story about Pearl Harbor has influenced what questions get asked about the Arizona and what research gets prioritized. For years, investigations focused on Japanese capabilities and tactics, while giving less attention to American vulnerabilities and failures. This is understandable. The Navy naturally prefers narratives that emphasize enemy skill rather than own force incompetence. But it has shaped what we know and what remains mysterious about that day. Recent scholarship has challenged some aspects of the traditional Pearl Harbor narrative. Historians have demonstrated that Roosevelt administration officials were well aware that war with Japan was imminent, even if they did not know the specific time and place of the first attack. Some have argued that intelligence about Japanese preparations was more extensive than publicly acknowledged, raising questions about whether the attack was truly as unexpected as portrayed. These revisionist perspectives remain controversial, but they illustrate how new evidence and changing historiographical approaches continue to reshape our understanding. Does this mean the United States somehow deserved the attack or bears responsibility for it? Absolutely not. Japan's aggression was its own choice, and the attack on Pearl Harbor was a clear act of war. But it does mean that the story is more complex than the traditional narrative suggests, and that understanding this complexity is important for drawing appropriate lessons about preparedness, intelligence analysis, and the dangers of institutional overconfidence. The Arizona, as the most visible symbol of Pearl Harbor, inevitably becomes entangled in these debates. What the wreck reveals or conceals matters not just for historical accuracy, but for how Americans understand their nation's entry into World War II and the broader questions about military preparedness and national security that Pearl Harbor raises. This gives the site political significance that extends beyond its memorial function. The third critical question concerns comparative philosophy and how different societies commemorate military loss. The American approach to the Arizona, leaving her as an underwater tomb and building a memorial above, represents a particular cultural choice. Other nations have made different decisions about war graves and military memorials. The Japanese, for instance, have struggled with how to commemorate their war dead without glorifying the militarism that led to catastrophic defeat. European nations scarred by 2 world wars often emphasize reconciliation and the futility of conflict rather than military glory. The Arizona Memorial could be compared to other significant war memorials: the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier in Arlington, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, the Hiroshima Peace Memorial in Japan, or the countless military cemeteries that dot European landscapes. Each represents different ways of processing collective trauma and honoring sacrifice. The Arizona is unique in that the dead remain present, tangibly beneath the memorial structure, rather than buried elsewhere or symbolically represented. This creates a powerful connection, but also constrains what can be done with the site. The British HMS Royal Oak, sunk by German submarine in Scapa Flow in 1939, offers an interesting comparison. Like the Arizona, the Royal Oak remains on the seabed where she sank, designated an official war grave. British divers occasionally visit to conduct memorial services, but unlike the Arizona, the Royal Oak has no structure built above her, and public access is more restricted. The different approaches reflect varying cultural attitudes about public memory and the accessibility of war graves. The CSS Hunley, a Confederate submarine raised from Charleston Harbor and conserved for museum display, represents the opposite approach: full recovery and preservation. The Hunley's crew were recovered, identified through forensic analysis, and given proper burial. The submarine itself became a museum piece, teaching Civil War history. This approach prioritizes historical knowledge and artifact preservation over leaving the site undisturbed, reflecting different priorities than those governing the Arizona. Philosophical traditions offer different lenses for evaluating these choices. A utilitarian might argue that the educational and scientific value of more intensive investigation of the wreck could justify careful disturbance if the knowledge gained prevents future disasters or enriches human understanding. The greatest good for the greatest number might favor research that benefits millions over reverence that primarily serves the families of the deceased. A deontological perspective might insist that respect for the dead is an absolute moral duty that cannot be overridden by consequentialist calculations. Kant's categorical imperative to treat persons always as ends in themselves, never merely as means, would suggest that using the remains of the Arizona's crew as objects of study, even for noble purposes, violates their fundamental dignity. The dead cannot consent to being studied, so we must err on the side of non-interference. A virtue ethics approach might focus on what attitudes and practices best exemplify honor, reverence, and wisdom in dealing with such sites. What would a person of good character do? The virtuous response might seek a middle path, honoring the dead through careful, respectful investigation that serves the public good while maintaining appropriate boundaries. This framework emphasizes developing right dispositions rather than following absolute rules or calculating consequences. Buddhist philosophy, with its emphasis on impermanence and non-attachment, might view the gradual dissolution of the Arizona as natural and appropriate. Clinging to the physical remains, trying to preserve them indefinitely, could be seen as a form of attachment that increases suffering. Better to accept that all physical things decay while finding ways to honor the memory that do not depend on material preservation. These philosophical perspectives do not offer definitive answers, but they illustrate the complexity of the ethical questions surrounding the Arizona. Different value systems, applied consistently, lead to different conclusions about what we should do. This suggests that there may be no single right answer, but rather a need for ongoing dialogue and deliberation that respects multiple perspectives. The fourth critical reflection examines the implications of allowing the Arizona to eventually collapse and disappear. Some preservation advocates argue that we have a responsibility to future generations to maintain and stabilize the wreck, ensuring that it persists as a memorial and historical site. This might involve extensive engineering interventions, reinforcing the structure, sealing leaking fuel tanks, or even encasing portions of the wreck in protective materials. Such interventions would be expensive and technically challenging, but potentially feasible with modern engineering capabilities. The cost would be substantial, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars for comprehensive stabilization. This raises questions about resource allocation. Is it appropriate to spend such sums on preserving one memorial when those resources could address pressing current needs, like veteran services, education, or poverty relief? Or does preservation of historical sites represent a different category of social good, worth significant investment, because it maintains connection to the past and national identity? Others argue that allowing the ship to gradually return to the sea is appropriate and even poetic. The Arizona is, in this view, on a journey that began with her sinking and will end when she is completely dissolved into the marine environment. This natural process mirrors the passage of memory itself, vivid and immediate at first, then gradually fading as time passes and the last witnesses die. There is a certain integrity in allowing this process to unfold without intervention, accepting that nothing human-made lasts forever. This perspective finds support in Eastern philosophical traditions that emphasize impermanence and cycles of creation and dissolution. Japanese aesthetic concepts like mono no aware, the pathos of things, and wabi-sabi, beauty in imperfection and transience, celebrate the poignancy of decay and the bittersweet nature of temporal existence. From this perspective, the slow dissolution of the Arizona is not a tragedy to be prevented, but a natural process to be accepted and even appreciated. There is also a practical consideration. Any stabilization effort would be temporary. Even the most robust engineering interventions would only delay, not prevent, the eventual loss of the wreck. Steel ships in salt water have finite lifespans. The Arizona has already lasted longer than many thought possible. Investing enormous resources to extend that lifespan by a few decades or even a century might not be the wisest use of limited preservation funds. This debate reflects broader questions about historical preservation. Do we have an obligation to maintain every significant historical site in perpetuity? Is there value in accepting that some things are meant to be temporary, that loss and forgetting are part of the human condition? What resources should societies devote to maintaining physical connections to the past versus investing in living communities and future needs? The answer may depend partly on the uniqueness and irreplaceability of what might be lost. The Arizona is genuinely unique. No other Pearl Harbor battleship remains in situ as a memorial. Other World War II vessels are preserved in museums, but none carry the same combination of historical significance, human loss, and memorial function. This uniqueness might justify extraordinary preservation efforts that would not be warranted for more common sites. Conversely, one could argue that the memory and lessons of Pearl Harbor do not depend on the physical persistence of the Arizona. Even after the wreck dissolves completely, the story can be told through documents, photographs, survivor accounts, and the memorial structure above. The site's significance is ultimately in the meaning we attach to it, not in the physical material below. From this perspective, letting the ship go while maintaining the memorial above might actually be more honest, acknowledging that the past is gone while committing to remember it. The USS Arizona lies beneath the waters of Pearl Harbor, her secrets slowly dissolving into history. For more than 8 decades, she has served as both tomb and teacher, monument and mystery. The revelations that continue to emerge from her rusting hull remind us that history is never truly settled, that new technologies and perspectives constantly reshape our understanding of even the most familiar events. What historians have discovered about the Arizona challenges the simple narratives we prefer. The ship's destruction was more complex than a single bomb strike. The attack that day succeeded partly because of American failures as well as Japanese skill. The decision to leave the ship undisturbed has preserved invaluable evidence but also created blind spots in our knowledge. The memorial function of the site exists in tension with the scholarly impulse to investigate and understand. These revelations matter because Pearl Harbor remains foundational to American identity and military culture. It represents the moment when American isolationism ended, when the nation committed itself to global engagement and military preparedness. The phrase, "Remember Pearl Harbor," became a rallying cry during the war and remains a touchstone for discussions about national security and military readiness. How we understand Pearl Harbor shapes how we think about threats, preparedness, and the use of military force. The shock that historians experienced was not simply about discovering previously unknown facts. It was about recognizing how much had been assumed rather than proven, how survivor memory and official accounts had created a coherent narrative that obscured complexity and uncertainty. The Arizona, studied more than any other sunken warship, still held surprises. This realization forced humility on experts who thought they understood Pearl Harbor completely. What the wreck reveals extends beyond tactical details of the attack. It illuminates how institutions construct and maintain historical narratives, how memory serves political purposes, and how physical evidence can challenge accepted stories. The oil still leaking from the Arizona, those tears that rise to the surface daily, symbolizes how the past continues to intrude on the present, refusing to be neatly contained or concluded. But the story of the Arizona is ultimately about individual human beings, the men who served aboard her, the families who lost them, the survivors who carried their memories forward. In recent years, some Arizona survivors have chosen to have their ashes interred within the ship, rejoining their shipmates in death. Divers carefully place these remains within the wreck during moving ceremonies that underscore the ship's continuing role as a living memorial. This practice will continue until the last survivor passes, which now appears likely within the next few years, given the advanced age of the remaining veterans. The last surviving officer of the Arizona, Lauren Bruner, died in 2019 at age 98. He had been on the anti-aircraft platform when the bomb struck, suffering severe burns as he climbed down a line to the adjacent repair ship USS Vestal. For 7 decades, he carried physical and emotional scars from that morning. His death marked another milestone in the transition from living memory to pure history. Each passing of an Arizona survivor diminishes the community of those who experienced Pearl Harbor firsthand, moving the event further into the realm of studied history rather than living memory. When the last Arizona survivor is gone, the ship will transition from living memory to pure history. Future generations will know the event only through documents, images, and the physical site itself. This makes the choices we make now about documentation, preservation, and research all the more crucial. We are the bridge between those who experienced Pearl Harbor and those who will study it as distant history. The tears of the Arizona, that continuous seepage of oil from the wreck, provide a powerful metaphor for this transition. The oil has been rising to the surface for 8 decades, visible evidence of the violence that occurred below. Engineers estimate that the remaining fuel will continue leaking for decades or even centuries more, long after the last personal memory of the attack has faded. But eventually, the oil will be exhausted. The ship will be gone, dissolved into the sea. The memorial above will perhaps still stand, but the physical connection it represents will have been severed. What will we have learned by then? What secrets will the Arizona have revealed in her final years of existence? The answers depend on the choices we make now about how to study, preserve, and honor this unique site. Do we prioritize reverence over knowledge, or find ways to pursue both? Do we invest resources in slowing the wreck's deterioration, or accept its eventual disappearance as natural and appropriate? Do we expand research and documentation efforts, or maintain current restrictions to preserve the site's memorial character? These are not easy questions, and there are no perfect answers. But they are questions we must grapple with thoughtfully and respectfully, honoring both the dead who rest within the Arizona and the living who seek to understand their sacrifice. The shock that historians experienced when they realized what the Arizona still hides was not just about discovering new facts, but about recognizing the limitations of our knowledge and the complexity of historical truth. The Arizona reminds us that the past is not a fixed, knowable thing that can be neatly catalogued and filed away. It is dynamic, contested, and constantly being reinterpreted through new lenses. Every generation asks different questions of history, brings different tools to bear, and draws different lessons from the same events. The wreck beneath Pearl Harbor, slowly corroding, gradually collapsing, continuously yielding fragments of truth, embodies this process perfectly. As we move further from December 7, 1941, the immediate emotional power of that day inevitably fades. For younger generations, Pearl Harbor is as distant as World War I was to the men who fought World War II. But the lessons remain relevant: the dangers of unpreparedness, the importance of strategic intelligence, the cost of military complacency, the reality that wars can begin with shocking suddenness, and the truth that ordinary people can display extraordinary courage in moments of crisis. The men of the Arizona did not ask to become symbols. They were simply sailors doing their duty aboard a ship in harbor on a Sunday morning. In the span of minutes, they were transformed into martyrs and monuments. Their ship became a shrine, Their deaths became a rallying cry. And now, decades later, their resting place continues to teach, to challenge, and to inspire. What the Arizona still hides, in her crushed compartments, her sealed magazines, her sediment-filled berthing spaces, matters not because it will dramatically change our understanding of the attack, but because it represents the untold stories, the unrecovered truths, the gaps in our knowledge that remind us of history's complexity. Every item that might be preserved within that wreck represents a human story, a letter never sent, a watch stopped forever, a photograph never viewed again, a life interrupted. The shock historians experienced came from realizing that the most studied attack in American naval history still harbors mysteries. But perhaps this should not be shocking at all. History is always incomplete. Our understanding is always provisional. New evidence constantly emerges to challenge established narratives. And some secrets, like the identities of many men still entombed within the Arizona, or the exact sequence of events in the ship's final minutes, may never be fully known. This incompleteness is not a failure, but a reminder of humility. It suggests that we should hold our historical certainties lightly, remain open to new evidence, and recognize that every narrative we construct about the past is partial and provisional. The Arizona, in all her tragic glory, teaches this lesson better than any classroom lecture or scholarly monograph. As the memorial continues to receive its millions of visitors, as oil continues to rise from the wreck below, as divers continue to document the slow collapse of this once mighty warship, the story of Pearl Harbor and the USS Arizona continues to evolve. What future technologies might reveal about the ship's final moments? What forgotten documents might surface in archives to illuminate crew members' lives? What will the memorial mean to Americans a century from now, when World War II is as distant as the Civil War is today? These questions cannot be answered now, but they are worth pondering. The Arizona's journey is not over. She continues to serve, continues to teach, continues to challenge our assumptions about memory, history, and sacrifice. In this sense, the ship has not truly died. She has simply transformed into something different, a monument that is also an active archaeological site, a grave that is also a classroom, a memory that is also an ongoing investigation. The moment historians realized what the shipwreck still hides was not an ending but a beginning, the start of a new chapter in our relationship with this iconic symbol of American resolve and sacrifice. As long as the Arizona lies beneath Pearl Harbor's waters, she will continue to yield secrets, provoke questions, and remind us that the past is never as simple or settled as we might prefer to believe. In the end, perhaps the greatest secret the Arizona hides is not any specific piece of evidence or undiscovered fact, but rather the profound truth that history itself is a living thing, constantly being re-examined, reinterpreted, and renewed through the dialogue between past and present. The men who died aboard the Arizona could not have known that their ship would become such a powerful symbol, or that their sacrifice would be remembered and studied for generations. But they served faithfully, faced death with courage, and left behind a legacy that continues to shape our nation's understanding of itself and its place in the world. That is the ultimate revelation from the depths of Pearl Harbor, that valor, sacrifice, and service transcend the specific circumstances of their moment and speak to something permanent in the human spirit. The Arizona still hides many things in her crushed hull and tangled wreckage, but what she reveals about courage, about memory, about the cost of freedom is clear enough for all who care to look, listen, and remember. The tears still flow, the oil still rises, and the story continues to unfold, chapter by chapter, secret by secret, teaching us that history is never finished with us, and we are never finished with history.